I try to tell people East St. Louis is like the canary in the coal mine because you look at a lot of other big cities, they've experienced the same thing, probably 10 or 15 years later. But I mean, you can go back to, we can go quickly, from slavery, and then you had Reconstruction. Reconstruction was the time period right after slavery from 1865 to around 1875, in which slave owners were actually paid reparations for losing their slaves. But again, we had a Freedmen's Bureau where they were supposed to give loans to free black people. But again, they denied that, and the South actually went back to a somewhat semi-slavery. So a lot of people during that time in the 1910s, they migrated north, because there were jobs up here, because actually the cotton gin was invented. So there's a lot of history there, but the jobs were up north because you talk about World War One, which is from around 1911 through 1918, I believe. And East St. Louis was a hotbed. They actually had people going down recruiting black people to come to East St. Louis for jobs because men went off to war. A lot of white men had to go off to war, so they had a need for employees. So in 1917, there was a big strike, and they used African Americans and blacks to be strike breakers during that time. It happened a lot. And again, East St. Louis, it happened in Tulsa. It happened in a lot of areas around this time, 1915 to 1925. And that's when Ida Wells Barnett started her paper, actually listing the lynches that were going on because it was so frequently. And another big, I think they say the biggest movie of all time came out around this time, Birth of a Nation. In that movie, the Ku Klux Klan was, looked at as a superhero. And the black man was looked at somebody who was now going to rape every white woman in town, and actually had a white actor in blackface, accosting a woman on the movie. The movie is very racist, but these are things that happen, that, like you said, that denied black people the right to be truly a part of the community. Now, East St. Louis, again, this was 1917. Then you had Tulsa, 1922, I believe. They had the big fire there. And the one that happened here, there's some articles you can go back and look at. Writer was Mr. Hurd, and he just said, people were setting houses on fire. It was a lot of houses like behind the big buildings here in downtown where black people stayed. And they actually was burning the house up, and when they come running out, they shoot them, So this whole downtown street, they had a man lynched on a pole right up the street here while they were, marching through the city, and they were, get it, and they were chanting, catch a nigga, get another, hang them for East St. Louis, They were trying to make East St. Louis a sundown town. They were like, we got to change this, and that was because whenever black people try to assert their First Amendment right, they felt threatened. Whenever they felt like they get their rights, they're going to lose some. So, yeah, the race riot was one of the worst in the country. I mean, in history. They say 45 people died, but I'm sure it was way more than that. So then you can move to the 1940s. You had World War II. We had a lot of industry here still. And my grandfather actually came up in like 1959, during that time. And that's when a lot of the young people, were like, hey, we're not going to put up with what our parents put up with. And we appreciate our parents and grandparents because they did put up with things that allowed us to be here. Otherwise they would have been murdered, I think my grandfather probably would have been murdered if he'd stayed in Indianola, Mississippi, And they actually left. My mother used to tell me they actually left, without telling a lot of people because he was a sharecropper, and he most likely owed money, to the landowner. Then the 1960s in East St. Louis, this is when you had, Black Power. You had a lot of people protesting right downtown here for jobs. They were protesting at the bank for at least one teller job. And a lot of the kids were arrested, put in jail. You can go back to St. Louis Post-Dispatch, see a lot of photos. where they got them locked up in like warehouses. So many kids got arrested, and that's why I say the young people are the ones who typically make the change. So during that time, East St. Louis, that's when the white flight and economic flight happened. Uh, Again, before that, they were building, projects. And why did they build projects? That was to keep people out of certain neighborhoods. You could build a 20-story building, put 500 people in it. So I think, and then, to add to insult, they name them after famous black people. Like Orr Weathers' apartment down the street here. Mr. Orr and Weathers were leaders in the community. And to name the substandard housing after them was basically like Martin Luther King Boulevard. It's an insult, and not. And so, yeah, at that time, that's when we had a second wave of migration during the 50s and 60s. And that's how they figured they'd take care of that problem, And it really exacerbated the issues that we're dealing with today. Oh, yeah, it's been private and it's been federal government, too. You've heard of redlining, where insurance companies have, said that certain neighborhoods, and this is, again, nationwide. We saw the things going on in Minneapolis, there are remnants of their racism that's happening now, with excluding people from communities. And then when you talk about redlining, these are urban planners now. You guys have people who are urban planners at school, and they're basically saying this neighborhood is undesirable. We can't insure this area, or it's a higher insurance rate. So I think a lot of times, that has, I think what the country has to do, the country has to apologize. The country has to, when you look at South Africa, right, when that government was overthrown, and that came from protests from within and without. We're talking a tidal wave, that forced them to free Nelson Mandela. And the first thing they did was Bishop Tutu was say, hey, let's have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And this commission is going to look at the evidence, and really come up with solutions. And what they did was have people testify, police brutality, all those things. And they actually, I believe that helped quell a lot of violence that really could have happened, because we're talking South Africa's 70% black, and so they could have really just wiped everybody out. But what that Truth and Reconciliation Commission did, I believe, is to make the African, the Afrikaners, the black, the natives, feel like their feelings, that they're being acknowledged, and that has not happened in America. I mean, you've had reparations for everybody. The Indians have had reparations where they've been able to get land and have casinos, and I don't have a problem with that. I mean, those casinos have helped them raise funds to build new schools and hospitals, and they're charting their own path now, and their communities are actually getting better. Less alcoholism, less of these things. If you're getting $100,000 check every year from, that's going to help your family come up a little bit, So I advocate for reparations. I think that's the only way that America is going to solve the crime and poverty issues in the country. When I look at my great-great-grandfather and your great-great-grandfather, he was able to go to school, get free land in America. In the West they had like a big rush, right? You've seen the TV shows where they just stake their claim and get 100 acres, That time we were just coming out of slavery and still semi-slavery, sharecropping. So the opportunities have never been there for us to even come up to par, economically with white America. Immigrants have come in. Most, I would say most of the Europeans in the country, their parents were immigrants who came after, the 1860s. There are very few of the, there's those blue blood families, right, that were in the colonies. So the big thing, like I said, the country has to repair what it has done to a certain aspect of people. And that would be reparations, to repair it. And I think that's the only way it's going to get better, honestly. That's right. You got to admit it first, right? And that's the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That's where they say, hey, look, free labor for the first 200, 300 years of this country made it the most powerful country in the world. And that's why China has come up, right? They're paying their people $2 an hour or something, if that, So free labor built this country. And then to treat people as 3/5 a person is a crime within itself. And time after time, black people have always fought for equality and justice. But I think that's the ways to do it is multifold. People say, oh, you can't give somebody a check. Yes, you can. And it ain't giving them nothing. This has been earned through blood and sweat and generations of denial. So I believe that there has to be payment, direct payment, that's going to help the community grow. I mean, I don't know what that number is, but we can look at what the Indians were paid when their land was taken. We can look at what the Japanese interned. They were paid some money. But I honestly think the government thinks the bill is too high. That's why they've never even wanted to deal with it, as to just say, oh, we can't even talk about that, That happened a long time ago. But we're feeling the remnants of what happened a long time ago. If my great-great-grandfather did not have the same opportunity as another person's, the net worth of a white person is like $186,000. So when you're born, your net worth typically could be $186,000. Now there are exceptions. We know we can go to West Virginia places, but the net worth of a black family is about $30,000. That didn't happen just by us not being brain smart or anything. That happened from lack of opportunity, and that's about 10 generations. And I'm saying you don't pay back 10 generations. You pay back maybe 2 generations. The young kids who were born today in the inner city, they need a trust fund. If a kid knows that they have a future ahead of them, like most, a lot of kids. I've worked with architects, and I tell them that my family was on welfare for about 4 years. When my mom and dad had divorced, and they were like, well, how could, why your mom didn't work, and why this and that, and why your dad didn't take care of it? And I was like, look, my dad was having issues at that time, but he did provide us with some money, but he had legacies that were affecting him, his own issues. And my mom was going to school. And so and I told him, I was like, you probably never had a day in your life where you looked in the refrigerator and there's nothing in there, And he was like, you're right, and I was like, that's what frustrates people. And a lot of these young people, they're so frustrated. You see in St. Louis, the crime and like I say, people being shot and killed. There needs to be an infusion of money in the community. And that money is not just coming from the federal government. It should come from all as local, federal, state. And they just got a lot of money with the CARES Act. The city can provide reparations. Here in East St. Louis, we can say, hey, we're going to give a $50,000 grant to anybody who builds a house in the city. That could be a part of it. If you're from here prior to certain years or something. And then on the state level, infuse money in the community, like they did in O'Fallon. That stuff wouldn't have been built without federal funds. The developers probably put in a lion's share, but it would not have been done without with the state and federal help. So I think that there has to be, and there has to be an infusion of capital in all of these communities in order to quell the unrest. It's frustration. You see people busting windows out in cars downtown, they're like, what the hell are they doing that for? First of all, they're stealing guns because people come to St. Louis, they're going to have a gun in their car, some people. And those become illegal guns, right? And then we're perpetuating the issue again. So I think that it's going to have to take reparations from federal, state, local businesses, A lot of these businesses in the country have, benefited, on the backs of again, on free labor and cheap labor. You look at a company like Pfizer, which makes the ED pill, the erectile dysfunction pill. They started in East St. Louis. They had a pigmentation plant over by Jones Park. And, once they moved out, right, out to St. Louis, like most companies did. So they left remnants of that in our community, the old warehouse and the environmental trash. There's environmental justice, that's where the federal government comes in on that part and clean up these communities and force developers and to make them develop these communities. Because I think Dr. King said injustice anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere. And that goes for security too. I hate to say that. And black people, they can't rob their own people because they ain't got nothing. So they're going to go to Central West End. They're going to do these things, and we're wondering why. It's because of hopelessness. You see young people carjacking people. They're 14, 15 years old. They wouldn't be doing that if they knew they had a future. So, and many sociologists say that they feel this should be done. And there's been a groundswell happening, and I feel like it is going to happen. It may not happen in my lifetime, but I'm gonna fight like hell for it while I'm here. And I think that's all we can do. We're so bent on traveling, being this and that, and keeping up with the Joneses. And I think of people like Dr. King and Medgar Evers, who fought for something, and my grandparents, they fought for something they weren't gonna get, but they did it. And that's why I think we have to have that mindset. To see somebody like, wow, that person came from East St. Louis, and they can reach out to that person too, through our magazine or social media now, right? So I think that's a big part of why we started the magazine. It's for the young people, and our goal is to have that magazine in every household, because when I was growing up, again, the media, you can talk about Archie Bunker's place, and he used racism all the time, and the media is so powerful in formulating people's mindset. Even today, young black kids, some, prefer a white doll over a black doll, when it's like, what does that? Because it self-perpetuates. When you see that being kicked at you every day, you're less than. So we want to. We're all equal, and I'm a Star Trek fan, so I can't wait to see a purple person, and then we'll find something else, I think, to be prejudiced about.